right, we're holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 18. Again, we're holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 18. We're in verse 5. And actually, we might actually finish verse 5 today. Hopefully. Again, we're holding by the book of Leviticus chapter 18, verse 5. Torah says, Ushmartem es hukosai, es mishpatai, sher yase oisam, adam v'chai behem ani Hashem. So here, as we said before, Torah says, you shall keep my ordinances, things that don't make sense, my judgments, things that do make sense, which if a man do, again, a little strange language there, you shall live by them. I am the Eternal. Right? So we've been speaking the last number of weeks in the Rabbi Chaim about what it means to live by them. Right? We spoke last week about life after death. Spoke quite a bit about that. Says Moed Rebbe, Rabbi go to Moshe, this should be well. Brings down his commentary on Chumash and Tam V'das. And the first thing is, he brings down, Rashi says, when the Torah says, V'chai behem, Rashi says, Lo Haba. Right? It's talking about the next world. You're going to live by them. It must mean in the next world. Why? Because if you're going to say it's this world, and the other person's going to die. Right? We all know we're going to die. Right? When a person's born, the clock is ticking. Yeah, very good. So in the end, you're going to die. So if that's true, we can't be talking about this one. Right? To live by that means in the next one. Right? To get reward in the next one. Very good. Right? So Rabbi here says, it's talking about the next world. And he says this world isn't considered life. Now, what's the reason? You're going to say, I live in this world. Right? Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, you have to be in this world in order to have a portion of the world to come. But this world is a world of difficulty. Right? It's a world of hardship. Yeah, so we'll see. He says this world is not a world, it's not life. Right? It's not life. All right, Tom, you live in this world. Very good. So we'll see. So he tells the story. With the Vilna Gaon. So the story with the Vilna Gaon is Elijah of Vilna more than 150 years ago. Elijah of Vilna was one night during the winter. Right? It was during the winter. And most people had gone to sleep. Right? Most people had gone to sleep. So what happened? And it was very cold. Right? It's winter, it was very cold as well. And pretty much everyone, in the town, whatever, in the city was asleep. And he heard a knock at the door. Vilna Gaon heard a knock at the door. And it was someone who was selling his wares, poor person, and whatever is going, trying to make a living. So the Gaon, made sure, all his needs were taken care of, right, and stay overnight. And, gave him to eat, gave him to drink, whatever. And this poor person who was selling his wares starts to speak. Starts to tell the Vilna Gaon his woes, right? What he's going through. He said he worked so hard to try and eke out a living. And even so, he says, whatever he has is not enough. Right? It's really living day to day. Right? Barely living day to day. Yeah, so he said that he said he's got bitachon, he's got faith and belief in God, that because he's having it so hard in this world, for sure, he's going to get tremendous reward in the next one. That's what he said. Right? He's telling him how hard it is to make ends meet, and he's barely making ends meet, if that. And that's a still of woe. But he says, for sure, I'm suffering, I'm having such difficulty. Then for sure, I'll get great reward in the next one. That's what he said. So what's the Vilna Gaon answer him? The Vilna Gaon answered, he says, in this world, a person can work very hard, right? He can work very hard, okay. But is working hard a guarantee for financial success? No. He said he can work very hard and not have very much. He says all the more so. If a person wants a portion of the world to come, all the more so you have to work very hard. Yeah, in order to warrant it. Right? So here there's a big difference. Right? In other words, a person works hard. And we always say, as the Chosroba says, in duties of the heart, you have to work hard. You have to do ishtadlus. You have to put your best foot forward. Yeah, is putting your best foot forward a guarantee? No. 40% we saw before. As the stats show, 40% of people today, at least in America, live day to day. They live paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. So working hard is not a guarantee for financial success. Now, everyone will tell you, if you don't work hard, you won't be successful. Yeah, money doesn't just, fall from heaven. It doesn't just fall from the sky. You gotta work. And you gotta work hard. But working hard is not a guarantee. Right? This is what he's telling this peddler. Yeah. You're gonna tell me what? That for sure. I should get a portion of the world to come because I'm working so hard in this world. So of course, I should get that reward. But what the Vilna Gaon say? A person can work very hard and still not see anything. They'll still not see the fruit of their labor. They can still be poor if they work very hard. Right? No guarantee. Only guarantees of life, as we always say. Death and taxes, not necessarily in that order. Okay. But he said, if you're going to work hard in this world, is that a guarantee of financial success? No. Not a guarantee. Obviously, everyone will say, but you have to do it anyway. Okay. Some have it easier, some not, but it's certainly not a guarantee. It's just because you work hard, right? Who says financially you're going to be successful? So he says, all the more so. You're talking about this world. So if you work hard, that's guarantee. That's a guarantee that what? You should have a portion of the world to come. Right? Look at the suffering. Look at the difficulty. But the Vilna Gaon said, if you think acquiring this world is hard, meaning making it big in this world, you see it's hard, and it's certainly not easy. You say, okay, what about Olam Haba? What do you think? Olam Haba is going to be a cakewalk? You think you're not going to have to do very much? You don't get a portion of the world to come? Right? So he says all the more so, says the Vilna Gaon, all the more so how much a person has to work, right? And how difficult the work will be in order to merit a portion of the world to come. Now, isn't this kind of depressing? Right? Because, first of all, someone's going to say, we've spoken about this before, someone's going to say, the Mishnah Pirkei Avos, right? Before every chapter, it says every Jew's going to have a portion of the world to come. Very good. Right? Every Jew will have a portion of the world to come. Okay. I mean, is that a guarantee? Right? Is that a guarantee? Not a guarantee? Why? How do I know? How do I know? Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin, last chapter of Sanhedrin, tells you people did merit portion in the world to come. Not just as someone once told me, I don't keep very much this and that. Your portion will be bigger. No, it's not a question of whose portion will be bigger or not. Who says you're going to get there? Right? What does the Gemara say? Gemara says, Vodah 2b to 3a, says in the Medrash also, if you don't prepare Erev Shabbos, you don't eat on Shabbos. What's it talking about? You don't prepare Erev Shabbos, you don't work hard in this world, then you don't eat in the next world. Then you don't have a portion of the world to come. Yeah, it's not a guarantee. Right? The Mishnah says the generation of the flood don't have a portion of the world to come. The generation of the dispersion, Tower Babel, they don't have a portion of the world to come. Certain kings didn't have a portion of the world to come. Yeah, it's not a guarantee. Definitely not a guarantee. I would say, most people are probably not that evil. And if they are, okay. Most people are not that evil, but they'll pay a price. In this world, potentially in the next world. Even if they don't know what they're doing in general, right? Even if they don't know what they're doing, I would say that, for some of these people, they have a portion of the world to come. Depends on what they've done, right? The bigger problem, I've heard many people say this, right? The bigger problem is, why would God give them a portion of the world to come? They didn't do anything in this world, right? You'll say, but they didn't know any better. Right? They were a potato farmer in Idaho, right? No offense. Anyone's a potato farmer grew up in Idaho. They grew up not knowing anything about Torah. Okay. So the things they did is we look at, right, they did it by accident. Okay, but they're going to pay a price. They're going to pay a price. But we're not going to say ignorance is totally bliss here. There are certain things, a person desecrates Shabbos in public. Well, that's pretty severe prohibitions, death penalty. Yeah. Person marries a non-Jew, that's also pretty bad. Yeah, one of the biggest sins out there. Right? So we mentioned this idea. Yeah. Why should God give them a portion of the world to come? Now, if you ask any Jew, as long as they're associated with the synagogue, if they're not, they're probably not going to care. But if you would ask them, yes or no, there are no buts, according to the Bible. According to what some people call the Old Testament. According to the Torah, is a Jew allowed to marry a non-Jew? No, but we said there's no buts. Right? So they understand. There's a red flag. It's a red line. Okay. So most people, if you're associated with the synagogue, will say you're not allowed to. Now, other people will say it doesn't matter. So they're a nice person, this, that, you got to accept them. All right. But at the end of the day, pretty severe prohibition. Pretty severe prohibition. Now, someone who intermarries, why would they deserve a portion of the world to come? They should deserve a portion of the world to come. Yeah? Because look how they live their lives. Forget about all the mitzvahs they don't keep. That's part of it. That certainly is part of it, but this is going beyond. Right? This is a major red line over here. But again, if we were playing God, put on my funny George Burns glass, my funny mustache, right? If we were playing God, right, and there's an obligation to keep the Torah, there's an obligation to keep the mitzvahs, and these people don't care. Now, why don't they care? In general, they don't care because they never learned. In all the transgressions they're doing, it's because of desire. It's a rebellion. Right? Really, any transgression a person does is a rebellion against God, right? Essentially, it's a rebellion. But at the end of the day, why is someone doing it? Not because they've learned so much and they've learned all the philosophy and whatever and all these things, and they go against God. No. Why are they doing it? Because what the heart tells them. Yeah, the rhyme or reason, it's desire. Right? I asked my Rebbe this question many years ago. Yeah, someone wanted to claim exactly this, that, when a Jew does something wrong, they go against what God says, it's a rebellion, right? Essentially, it is a rebellion. It's going against what he says. That's a rebellion, right? But he said, no. He said, even if you want to tell me it's a rebellion, why are they doing it? They're not doing it because they're so well learned and they know all these things. They say, specifically, I'm going to go against God, right? I'm specifically going to go against God, fight against him. Who are you fighting against? You don't have any knowledge, right? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you doing it? Desire. That's all it is, right? It's desire. You'll tell me, but isn't it a rebellion? Technically it is, but that's not why they're doing it, right? There was somebody when I was learning JTS by Jewish Theological Seminary, the head of the conservative movement. There was one person there who taught Gemara, taught Talmud, part of the Talmud faculty, and he claimed on himself he's probably the last apikoros, the last heretic of this generation. Yeah, right? Now, why would he make that claim? Bragging rights. Why would he make such a claim? Because I think he learned enough. He has knowledge. And then specifically goes against. Right? Can you have some people like that today? It's very rare. You have someone that has a certain level of knowledge, right? I'll give an example. When I was part of the conservative movement, so they say, like rabbis in the 40s and 50s, they were Orthodox, right? It really started as an Orthodox movement, and then, then sort of went off the rails. So they wanted to make it more modern, for the 20th century, but whatever. Eventually it went off the rails, not that much different between the Reform movement and conservative movement, just they started out differently. But okay, so I asked the great rabbi, one of the Torah giants. I mean, I definitely consider him a Torah giant. I think a lot of people would. Also learned in Lakewood for 10 years under Shneur Cutler. Whatever. He was whatever. He knew a lot. He was a big rabbinic scholar. Yeah. Anyway, I asked him this question. So I said, take somebody in the 50s. One of these conservative rabbis. I said, did they really know anything? I said, let's call a spade a spade. Tell me, did you ever come in contact with any of these people? They actually knew something. Like, back 40, 50 years ago. So I said, I'll tell you a story. So the former, vice chancellor, I think it was vice chancellor. I don't think he was ever chancellor of JTS, but whatever, former vice chancellor used to come and pray by him. Yeah, sometimes, whatever. Sometimes he'd come in the morning, right, and pray there. So I said, okay. So he said, he started asking me questions. Different things, whatever it was. I said, okay. He said, the questions he asked me, the people in my Daf Yomi share could have answered. Now, what's Daf Yomi? People, there are many people today that it was instituted, I don't know, about in 1930s, 1920s, 1930s. This idea of learning 2 pages of Talmud a day. When you learn 2 pages of Talmud a day, in 7.5 years, you finish the entire Talmud. Now, some people are against it because unless you really take it seriously in a review and you learn it more in depth, right? You don't retain it, right? So, some people, that's the only learning they do because that's, they don't have so much, they don't have so much time because they work, right? Or whatever. But, whatever, it's every day, right? Shabbos, festivals, fast days, right? So whatever, you got to keep up. You get behind. It's very hard to keep up. So for people, that's the learning. That's what they learn during the day, right? That's as much time they have. Again, we're not saying there aren't people that don't, don't take it seriously. Plenty of people take it seriously, right? And they'll review and whatever. Okay, other people, whatever. That's what they learn. How much they review, I can't say. Right? I can't say. Right? I think for some people, probably not very much, but okay. For people, that's what they learn. That's what they learn during the day. Good. So, they're not necessarily learning it in depth. So they're not learning it, And then to get a general idea how things work, let's say, they go to a class, a rabbi gives a class, whatever it is, very good, on that. Yeah, it goes more in depth, less in depth, but again, you're going to cover ground, right? The whole point is you cover ground, but, you go too fast, you don't remember anything. Good. So anyway, that's daf yomi, right? That's what daf yomi means. So the rabbi said, the question that this conservative rabbi asked me, a bunch of the questions, he says people in that class could have answered. That means they weren't so sophisticated questions, right? And it showed a lack of knowledge. Now, not a small lack of knowledge, big lack of knowledge, right? Now, could there have been conservative rabbis in the 40s and 50s that actually knew something? Could be. Listen, Rabbi Saul Lieberman was there. He was a tremendous rabbinic scholar. Big question what he was doing there exactly. Right? Okay. Yeah, somebody like him who knew a lot. Yeah, people would consider him, a big Talmud Chacham. Okay, a big rabbinic scholar. Okay. Question what he was doing there, the whole different thing. Okay. Got some people. Yeah, maybe had a handful of people. But this rabbi was telling me, for the most part, no. Even back then. See, when I went there, very simple. These people are never going to know anything. They're never going to learn very much. It's very clear from the curriculum. They're never going to learn very much. Right? When I was learning, in a certain place before, before I sort of changed hats a little bit. So I went back actually shortly after I left. It was like a few months after I left. And a friend of mine there made a bris, right? Had a circumcision for his son. And there was somebody there. I saw it. I guess this person came when I'd already left. And this person was a rabbinical school. Because a rabbinical school at JTS. Becoming a conservative rabbi. So I told him, I said, I think it's a great thing you're here learning. So he said, yeah. So I said, yeah, because this is the only real learning you're ever going to do. Because once you leave, you'll never do any real learning again, right? Unless you really go to yeshiva, right? But if you don't go to yeshiva, you'll never do any real learning again, right? So this person, I would expect something from that from somebody like you. I said, yeah, but I wasn't kidding. I said, I wasn't saying it to put you down. I mean, I got other things I could probably say. But I said, that wasn't the issue. I wasn't there to make fun. I said, I made a point. And the point is you're learning now how to learn. That's a good thing. But when you get back, you're not going to learn this stuff. You're going to learn all kinds of other things that don't matter. You learn, whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever, a lot of things not going to matter. Right? Learning's the most important thing. You're not going to do it. You're certainly not going to do it in a real way. Right? It's not like you're going to immerse yourself in yeshiva for the next 5 years or 3 years or, whatever. You're going to go back and be a conservative rabbi. Very good. And so I said, you won't do any real learning. I said, that's the point. That's exactly the point. Yeah, I said, it's a good thing you're doing it now. Yeah. If you stick with it. If you don't stick with it. So, you learn how to make sermons. Okay. Whether it's true or not, another issue. You'll never learn how to learn. You'll never learn how to look at something and take it apart. Right? Certainly not. But, but I said it's a good thing you're doing it now. Because you ain't never going to do it again. Yeah. And that's the truth. So a lot of these people, that I was with, during that time, yeah, I see what some of them are doing, right? And I mean, they can't hold a candle to anything in learning. But they don't do it. They don't do it. They don't know. They wouldn't know. And their teachers wouldn't know. Right? It's very clear. I just had somebody, I mentioned this last week. So I don't want to hop on it so much. Someone had someone asked about getting a reform conversion. Yeah, I think they're going to medical school, whatever the case is, and better get it done. It'll be quicker and whatever. So they asked me my opinion. right? Wrong person to ask. Wrong person to ask, right? So, so I told them straight out. I said, why are you going to do something that no one's going to recognize? Yeah, no one's going to recognize it, right? What happened is no one's going to care, right? No one. Sorry, let's say better. No one's going to recognize it. No one's going to recognize it. So I said, so what's the point of doing it? No, what do you mean? Like there are people out there. I understand. I do understand. They want to have the status. They want to have the name of being a Jew. Okay. But if you're going to do it as a travesty of a mockery of Hashem, and you're the only one's going to accept it because the conservative movement won't accept it, the Orthodox movement's not going to accept it. It's only accepted by you. So I told them Kaufman's law. Kaufman's law is that if you're going to do it right. If you're not going to do it, don't bother. But do it right. Say, but I'm not going to have so much time, and it's really probably a lot to know, and this and that. I said your choice, but I said if you're in medical school, you're right. You're not going to have that much time, right? You're not going to have that much time to focus. So I said better take it step by step than go through this, which is, I say, it's much easier. Okay, very good. It's much easier. So what? Is it true? Is it truthful or not? No. So that was it. I said you want to do it, it's your choice. But I said I would think you want to accept it. You want to do it right. And they do want to do it right. Right now, what's the case? They're crunched for time. Makes sense. Medical school, they're going to weed out, 15% the first year, the other 10% the second year. Be lucky if you make it by the third year. It's a lot of work, okay? But you want to try and convert at the same time, that's going to be very hard. That's going to be very hard. So I do understand people want to have status, whatever. It said, well, would it be a stepping stone? I get this question a lot. It's a stepping stone. I don't know. I don't know if I call it a stepping stone. The reason I wouldn't call it a stepping stone is makes people like me a job, more difficult. Why? Because I'm going to get all that garbage out of your head, but you're learning everything wrong and backwards. I don't think one thing they're going to teach you is going to be right, for the most part, right? So you're going to have to start from scratch anyway. Either person had a conservative conversion. Yeah, a bunch of people have asked me this question, and that is, it's going to help me towards this conversion. I said, no. I said, you have to start from scratch. It's kind of like someone who's a Christian. They come out of Christianity, and they have to be retaught everything, right? You go back to the stories, the stories of the Bible, quote unquote, and all that. They're going to be retaught. They for sure have to be retaught, right? Because everything they learned is wrong. Every last thing wrong, mistranslation, more than that. I mean, whatever. They got a lot to go through. They got a lot they have to relearn, right? So some people say, but that's the only thing we have nearby. Okay, so what? So eventually a person has to move. They don't have a choice. They have to move. You have to move within walking distance of an Orthodox synagogue. Okay. Right? If you can't do that, this is the only game in town. Okay. Now, some people say, better I go to that. At least I meet people. I get to see Jews. Okay, that's great, but they're not doing what they're supposed to do. Most of them. Not all of them. They're not keeping Torah properly. They're not keeping mitzvahs properly. And eventually, it's not going to take very much time before, you start doing a lot more and you're going to be the most religious one there. And then they're going to try and convince you, why doing this? You don't even have an obligation. You're not Jewish. Whatever. And we don't even do these things, right? So that's going to weigh down on the person. Because, if Jews aren't really doing it right, in this case, now they're not questioning whether what they're doing is right or not. But again, other people can bring you down. They'll say, why do you have to do it? Why do you have to dress that way? Why do you have to this? Why do you have to that? Etc. Right? But I do understand, and a lot of people will say this, so I don't have to go into detail, but it can be a very lonely process. Yes, it can. Yeah, it can be a very lonely process. Okay, that's true. But at the end of the day, would you rather at least be around people that think the same way and hopefully go in the same direction more or less or not? That's the question. Right? Now, for some people, they'll say, you're right. It makes sense, but doing things by yourself, I'm like, you do things by yourself anyway. They don't keep Shabbos properly. They don't do things properly. Right? It's more like a social thing. Okay. But again, but you have to relearn everything. Everything. I once saw someone had, I don't know, I forget what it was, where they went and they had, whatever, they had quote unquote a prayer service there. So they saw whatever, they had things photocopied. They had like, they cut up the Shema, they cut up other things. I mean, it was like, it was a joke. Total joke. Yeah, they cut up everything. So it says, but it's easier. Okay, so what? So what if it's easier? Is it true or is it not true? Right? You say, but it's a means to an end. What's the means to an end? You don't have the status even to go to the mikveh. You don't have the status of being a Jew. Right? If you have to go in front of three, at least three, you have to go in front of three people at least have to keep Shabbos. I mean, it should be a rabbinical court, but they should keep Shabbos. At the very least. Hey, they should know the laws of conversion also, more or less. Yeah. But I said if you go to a rabbinical court, quote unquote a rabbinical court, you have three Jews there, let's say, we'll make it easy. Their mother's Jewish. You got three Jews there, okay. And let's say 3 out of 3, because I'm gonna say they're not keeping Shabbos properly. 3 out of 3 desecrate Shabbos. So if 3 out of 3 desecrate Shabbos, what happens if you desecrate Shabbos in public? You have the status of a non-Jew. Now, can a non-Jew be on a rabbinical court for conversion? No. Now again, unless the person repents, they get their status back, right? But if they desecrate Shabbos in public, whether they know anything or not, technically they have status of a non-Jew. Certain things apply to them, like they can't touch your wine if it's open, right? As long as it hasn't been pasteurized, right, or cooked. Yeah, answering amen to their blessings. Other things, there's a lot of ramifications here, right? So the last time I checked, it would make sense without knowing anything. And if we don't know anything, if this person has the status of a non-Jew, let's say, could they be on a rabbinical court for anything? For anything? I mean, come on. I mean, the whole thing's a joke. So I'll tell you how far it goes. While I'm on this rant, I'll tell you how far it goes. So most people know the story, but still, it's a good story to repeat. So senior rabbi at my synagogue growing up, or now became a senior rabbi, whatever, eventually. So she's becoming religious. She asked him the following question. She asked him, are you allowed to ride a bike on Shabbos? Now, I probably never learned the laws of Shabbos in depth. That's pretty much my guess. Yeah, because he wouldn't know how. He never went to yeshiva. He wouldn't know how. Okay, but I'll tell you what his answer was. His answer was, you want to know what I do? That was his answer. But that wasn't the question. The answer should have been, I don't know. That should have been the answer. I don't know. His answer was, you want to know what I do? I was like, no. I don't really care what you do. I want to know, according to Jewish law, are you allowed to ride a bike or not? And his answer was, I ride a bike on Shabbos. But you see, that wasn't the question. Yeah. And this person wouldn't have known how to answer anyway. How do I know? Because I know what they study in rabbinical school. They don't study the laws of Shabbos in depth. They might learn how to pray on Shabbos, how to lead services on Shabbos. Okay, because there are many things you say on Shabbos you don't say during the week or whatever they end up saying. They're not learning the laws in depth, I can tell you that. That I know for sure. Right? I mean, it's not even close. right? So now things have got watered down more, right? So any of these people left really know how to learn, how to do anything, right? Can open up a Gemara and start learning. Can open up a Mishnah Berurah, the code of Jewish law, and start going through and understanding and what the case is and why and not, and it takes years of learning. Yeah, very good. But if you don't learn the most important thing, you take out the meat and potatoes. What do you know? What do you know? Right? So some people say, some of them are learning. Maybe. I haven't met too many of them. Yeah. I've not met too many of them. Some of them, yeah. Keep Shabbos to what extent? I don't know. But if they never learned, they've never taught, how would they know? But it's more than that. They don't believe in it. Right? Maybe they keep Shabbos. I know some people, have Shabbos meals, this and that, go to synagogue. Okay. They would call themselves Shomer Shabbos, like they keep Shabbos. Okay. Now they may say, well, I don't keep Shabbos like you. Yeah, of course not. That makes sense because they don't believe in it. They don't believe in all these rabbinical laws, quote unquote. That's taken away from God. It's taken away from Torah. Okay. So that's to do with they have an oral law. They have an oral law, issue. But there's a bigger issue. The bigger issue is they do what they want. And they pick and choose. That's the bigger issue. The much bigger issue. Now, if you can show me where it says that, you can do that. Okay, we can have a discussion. Short discussion. But even if you can prove that, let's say, which they can't, but let's say, I'm in a generous mood today, let's say they could prove it doesn't work. Can they pass that down to the next generation? What's the answer? No. How do I know? Because 50, 60, 70% intermarriage. That means it doesn't work. Yeah, that means, let's say, we'll round off. 60%, 6 out of 10 are intermarried. That's a disaster. Disaster. Now, even by the Orthodox will say, so you also have a dropout rate. Okay, what's the dropout rate? You want to tell me it's 10%? I think it's too high, but let's say I'll be generous here. 10%. That means 9 out of 10 are doing the right thing. 9 out of 10 are staying religious and passing it down. That's pretty good. That is pretty darn good. Even if you have a 60% dropout rate, it's a disaster. Disaster. One of my rabbis I first learned under, a blessed memory, told me a few years ago. It was 3-4 years ago. Yeah, in the modern Orthodox movement. So he told me, he was teaching another yeshiva, he was the mashgiach, the spiritual advisor in the yeshiva. Yeah. And he told me that in the modern Orthodox community today, 3 out of 4 in the modern Orthodox community today, again, there are some stronger communities, okay. But he told me a statistic 3-4 years ago, I don't know why he was telling me this per se, but he said 3 out of 4 dropout. That means it's a 75% dropout rate. On top of that, he said, a lot of students he was teaching were college students. Right? That's how I got there as well. Right, from college, my third year. That's why I went to learn in Israel. And he said, well, at least if they go back to the university, and they're in charge of the minyan where they are, pray, whatever, then at least we know they pray, they pray with 10 men. They pray with the minyan. Now, this is what he's telling me verbatim. Yeah, in the modern Orthodox movement. Again, there are some that are much stronger than this. Very good, right? Much stronger. But he told me there's a 75% dropout rate. Now, what's the reason? There's an obvious reason. Right, because I was part of it. I saw it. Right? What's the obvious reason? Now, keeping Shabbos is important to them. Keeping kosher is important to them. Learning, is important. That's true. Yeah, sports is also important. movies are important, or more important, less important, whatever it is, right? And certain things in secular society are also important. It's not a question, oh, we have to have a balance. That's not the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is it's too much of that and less of Torah. That's the issue. Right? So when you have too much of that and less of Torah, what's going to happen? You'll be more secular. And what's going to happen when you go to university? Now, there are many people in that community, while I'm on this tirade, want their kids to get, Ivy League education. Get a good education. Good college education. I'm not going to trash college education. That's not the topic here. Right? But I will tell you one story. There are parents have said that when when the kids came back, they weren't the same. They weren't religious anymore because they went to university. Now, they didn't live at home. It was on campus. Yeah. So I heard I heard a great rabbi once say that the statistic is, and he was in the know, so I'll take his word for it. The statistic is, how long does it take for, let's say, a modern Orthodox kid, 18 years old, goes to university? How long does it take for that person to no longer be Shomer Shabbos? That they no longer keep Shabbos. So someone might say, oh, at least a year. Maybe they'll be strong for a year, maybe 2 years, 1 semester. That was the statistic. You stick a modern Orthodox kid in any of these environments, 1 semester they come back, they're already not keeping Shabbos. Now, that's also obvious. Why would I say it's obvious? Because when all the parties and stuff going on Shabbos, that's when it goes on. So you got to stay home. You got to, you have your Friday night meal, and then you go, my wife saw this also, or modern Orthodox friends, they came for Shabbos meal, and they went out partying. There's not a contradiction by there. Yeah. And a lot of them, they married Jewish. They married someone Jewish. But think about it. Isn't that a major contradiction? Yeah. They grew up, let's say, modern Orthodox, and she became 10 times more religious than all of them combined. Why? Because you make it real. This isn't real, right? How in the world can you justify going to Shabbos dinner, let's say you hear words of Torah, and then you go out and go party and get smashed? That's what everyone else does. That's part of the environment, right? Like our Victor Miller, blessed memory, was saying, he's talking about this 70 years ago, right? What are some subjects? Take up in university, right? Women and booze, right? That's it. Or narcotics. Yeah, plenty of good things you could learn there. Yeah, so that's what's going on. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. You know what people do. Yeah, so it's not a contradiction by them. So if that's what they're doing, and that's what they're holding by, it's over. Why are they going to be bothered doing anything Friday night Jewishly? Maybe do it a little bit, I don't know, whatever, right? But if all the things are on Shabbos, it's only going to be a matter of time. Why? Because a major conflict. The major conflict between Shabbos and fun, right? And, you got all the, you got football games on Shabbos, you got basketball games on Shabbos, if they go to these things. Or people, if they don't go to those things, they go partying. That's what they do. That's what they do. Anyone studying Friday night late? Come on, nobody. That's the whole point. Okay, you're there to learn. You're there, hopefully to get good grades and pass and all that. Very good. Yeah, but that's what's going on, right? So that statistic is not so outlandish. It's certainly not outlandish. Say, oh, no, it's exaggerating. But if everything's on Shabbos, how in the world are they going to be able to do it? Yeah, they're not in an insular environment. A lot of the friends probably not doing it, or maybe, some here, there, but their resolve is going to be much weaker. Much, much weaker. Right? So I would have said it would take it a little bit longer. Right? I would have said maybe a year, maybe a year and a half, but it makes sense. Why? Because a lot of peer pressure. And all the fun stuff is going on in Shabbos. So if all the fun stuff is going on Shabbos, how in the world are you going to fight that? Unless you go away for Shabbos. Unless you're part of a different community or whatever. How in the world are you going to do that? It's going to be very, very hard. Right? Extremely hard. Anyway, back to my point. Right? I can speak about this for days. Yeah. Yeah, back to my point. What did the Vilna Gaon say? What was the Vilna Gaon's answer? The Vilna Gaon's answer was, you're going to tell me you have a difficult life, right? And you put all this effort in, and you're going to tell me, oh, for sure you have a portion of the world to come. Right? That there's nothing to talk about. Why? Because you suffered, you worked so hard in this world. Right? And you didn't have it easy. Okay, very good. Right? So all the more so this person says that they are going to have a portion of the world to come, right? Because of all the hardship. Comes on, the Vilna Gaon says, no, that's not a guarantee. To the opposite. You have to work very, very hard to have a portion of the world to come. Just because you suffered in this world and you live day to day, week to week, month to month, and you had it really hard, right? And you barely made ends meet. Okay. That means you're gonna get a guaranteed spot. You're gonna get a guaranteed spot in Om Haba, right, in the next world because of all the hardship you went through in this world. But what'd you do? Keep Torah mitzvahs, or you didn't keep Torah mitzvahs? And there are different levels. Okay, right? There are two tests there. There's a test of ashirus, of wealth, and a test of poverty. The test of ashirus, of wealth, is if a person has it and God helped them, is he going to help others? And they're not going to be haughty. They're not going to be conceited. Yeah? What's the test of poverty? If a person struggles, are they going to thank God even the little that they have? Yeah? Well, the Vilna Gaon says you're making a mistake here. Just because you worked hard and you suffered, right? You barely made ends meet, and there are people like that their whole lives. They struggle, okay, some more, some less, whatever it may be. Yeah, they may struggle because they struggle in this world. That's a sign, that's a sign you're going to get a portion of the world to come. You're going to walk straight in because you had it so hard in this world. Says the Vilna Gaon, no. And everyone would agree with the Vilna Gaon over here. Because suffering and going through what you're going through has no connection whatsoever in general to that spiritual world. That spiritual world, says the Vilna Gaon, you have to work very hard to get it. Just because you suffered in this world, okay. We all suffer, some more, some less. Everybody has difficulty. So if everyone has difficulty, going to say the amount of difficulty the person had, that's their ticket. Who says? Who says they get a direct line? That they get a direct ticket in? You got to work for it. Right? If a person, okay, you tell me they're mentally challenged, they have other issues, fine. God's not going to respect anything of them, and that soul is being punished being in that messed up body. Yeah? It's not the person's fault, right? Because it's not liable, right? The person was born mentally challenged. It's not their fault. It's not the parent's fault. The soul goes into a messed up bodies, payback, reincarnations, payback, for whatever it did. Okay. So God's not going to respect anything of them because they can't do anything. According to their level of understanding, right? They have to be taught. Very good. Right? You teach them as much as they can understand, right? But at a very basic level. A very basic level. They have the IQ of a 5-year-old. Right? No offense to any 5-year-old out there. Right? They have the IQ of a 5-year-old. What does a 5-year-old understand? What do they understand? They understand anything. They understand, yes, right? Yes, no, other things. Okay, but what level of sophistication? They don't understand anything. Yeah, train them. Okay. Everyone according to their level. If they don't have a level of understanding, they're exempt from anything. Right? But, you can't feed them treif. You have to try and educate them. Right? You can't feed them non-kosher and all that. Very good. So they have to. They have to teach them how to shake a lulav and, other things. Okay. Right? But they're not going to be expected to do very much in God's eyes because they're limited. tremendously limited. Yeah, but if a person is not limited per se, then that person has the greatest potential. So when a person has the greatest potential, we never know what our potential is, right? So a person can't say, "Well, I suffer this way and that way, so obviously I get a straight line over here." Right? So too, we'll take another step further. If a person suffers, let's say they're dying, we'll make it easy. They're dying and they're suffering, right? Major health issues. Let's say, okay, if they acknowledge, as the Mabit says, Beit Elokim, in his book, literally the house of God and the gate of repentance, yeah, he says that the only way you get atonement over here is you have to admit that all the suffering you're getting is because of sin. Now that's a huge thing. So if you admit the suffering I got in this world, let's say health-wise, and the person knows they're dying, and they acknowledge it's because of their sin, that has tremendous atonement. Tremendous atonement. If a person says, "Woe to me, my bad luck, I caught this thing and this and that, and now I'm suffering," but they don't acknowledge it comes from God, and they don't acknowledge it's because of sin, they don't get the atonement. Now, don't they get partial atonement? They don't get any atonement for that. For all the suffering, they get tremendous atonement here. Right? Dying is an atonement. Yeah, it doesn't atone for everything. Right? It's certainly a partial atonement for sure. Right? I'm not guaranteed it's going to atone. It's certainly not going to atone for everything. But if a person suffered in this world, they suffered a lot. That can be tremendous atonement as long as a person identifies that the sin is what is their suffering, because of the sin. Whatever sins they've done. So I'll take it another step further. Right? Let's see how far this goes. Mordechai Pogromansky, a blessed memory, was a rabbinic genius in tells, and miraculously survived the war. Many, many miracles happened to him that he survived World War II. Murray was in contact with him, went to see him after the war. I mean, he's one of the bona fide Torah giants of the last generation. Nothing to talk about. And truly after the war, he got sick. He got sick with cancer. And he was suffering, like his body racked in pain. He became blind. He was suffering tremendously. So the doctors want to give morphine. They want to give morphine to ease the pain. Obviously, they knew how much to give him. Otherwise, you give too much morphine, the person dies. Right? So that you can't do. But they wanted to ease the pain. Very good. He got wind of that. He sat up with all his strength. Again, you have to see who you're talking about here, but he's sitting up with all his strength when he heard this. And he looked up to heaven and he says, "God, do whatever you want to my body." He says, "You rack my body with as much pain as you want." He said, because I'm coming straight to you in paradise. I'm coming straight to you in Gan Eden. He's like, "Come on, give me all the pain. I'll take all the pain." Right? All the suffering in this world. And that'll be an atonement. I'll come clean to you in the next one. Now, how many people are like Mordechai Pogromansky? Probably none. Yeah, not to mention he was an absolute genius and in different things and how righteous he was, right, and all that. But even at the end of his life, he died young. He died very young, in the early 40s. Yeah, but he was in so much agony. He was in so much pain. Yeah, but what did he tell God himself? He said, "God, you can do whatever you want with my body." He said, "Give it all the pain. Give me all the pain you can give. Because that means I'm going to come to you straight and pure. I'm going to come straight to you in paradise." Most people at that point would say, "I'll take the morphine. Just give me the morphine." Yeah, because it's too painful. Person racked in pain. Yeah, it's painful. Totally painful. Yeah, I can't imagine. And usually what happens is, they get morphine, they go to sleep, and they die. That's, not direct, they're not directly killing them, right? But usually at the end, that's what happens. They never gain consciousness. So the story I just heard recently, somebody was dying, and they knew they were dying, but they wanted to see their son. He came in, and he was like, I guess, in and out of consciousness, but he was pretty much awake, and they wanted to get morphine. But he's afraid to get morphine, he's not going to wake up. They wanted to say goodbye. So, he came, saw him, he spoke, this and that, gave him some morphine, that was it. Like next, in the middle of the night. Middle of the night, he passed away. Right? That's what it does. Again, it's not direct killing them. Right? That would be forbidden. Right? But then, kind of the body shuts down and whatever. And that's what happens. But what's the point? The point is acknowledgement. When a person acknowledges, it's because of things they've done. And that's why they're in pain. And that's why they're suffering. That can wipe out a lot. That can wipe out a lot of sin. Right? But what's the issue? See, a lot of questions, I'll take them in a second. Well, what's the issue? The issue is a person is in pain or a person is suffering, whatever it may be. What's the first thing they're going to say? The first thing they're going to say is take it away. That's what they're going to say. They don't want to withstand it. It's too much. It's too hard. On the other hand, if we understood what pain does and how much it atones, we would have, what would a person do? A person would ask for more of it. Yeah. Why? Because they understand what it does. They understand the ability to atone. Right? The problem is, it's very hard. Imagine. We use Mordechai Pogromansky as an example here. So you imagine that somebody's racked in pain, blind, like in unbelievable pain, and they still have the wherewithal to say, give me all the pain. They look up to heaven and say, God, give me all the pain because I'm coming straight to you. Do whatever you want to my body. My soul's coming straight to you. Most people at that point would say, kill me. Let me die. It's too much. My body can't take it. Right? But they're missing out on a golden opportunity. Now, again, I'm not here to judge. Right? Person is, in serious pain, they want to suffer. Right? Then there's the whole, but if we understood how much sin it takes away, you'd say, give me more. But nobody wants it. That's catch-22. Nobody wants it. But if we would see how much of the bad things that we do, that it atones for, we'd say, give me more of it. Give me a huge dose of it, but nobody wants it. That's kind of the catch. That's kind of the catch-22. All right, let me take some questions here. Someone says, you have a lot of obstacles to conversion. Yes, you do. Finances, location, age, okay. Infirmity, good. A lot of good things here. Yeah. Is there any point to keep trying to convert? Or try to remain a Noahide? So the questions are like this. The Gemara says, and I'm not here to judge, but the Gemara says very clearly that a person will suffer tremendously if they had the ability to convert and they don't. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Most people will say you don't have an obligation to convert. We're not looking for converts, right? You all could drop dead. No one's looking for converts. Anyone wants to convert, no offense. Right? No offense. We're not interested in converts, but someone had the ability to convert. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Simply, it means God sees through your heart of hearts, you could have done it. You could have done it. Yeah. I did an interview with somebody, a student of mine. She should be well. And one of the things people say, and this is what she said, is that the reason a person can't convert is because of money. So she says, okay, let me tell you, a story. She's on disability. Now she happened, to live with the parents. Okay, so that took away some bills, i.e., if they rent and I don't know, food is chipped in, whatever. I don't know exactly. Took her 3 years to save up and eventually move cross country. Now, how'd she move cross country? She moved from the Pacific Northwest to Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah, she didn't just take a U-Haul and go. She made about 10 trips within a year, back and forth, about 3,000 miles, a little more, probably more. Yeah. Then snowstorms, other things, right? In a minivan, a whole bunch of trips. Yeah, I think it was 10 altogether. I'll double check, but I think it was like 10 altogether. And she eventually did it. Moved into the community. I took my class for a couple of years, at least 3 years, I think. Moved into the community, would have converted probably relatively quickly. They had to brush up on their Hebrew, and then COVID hit. Right? When COVID hit, then everything shut down, as most people remember. So everything shut down, so it took longer. Right? But what was the point? The point she made was people can think, oh, it's impossible to do financially. Yeah, a person makes a budget, this, that. They said it can be doable. So, and she said on herself, she knows people that made that claim, but, they had expenses they didn't need. Maybe they felt they need, whatever. So some people say, no, the numbers just don't work. Okay. Right? But this person was saying, I'm on disability. How much you making on disability? Less than $1,000. I have to believe. I can't imagine. It wasn't more than that. Certainly wasn't more than that. But she was also taking classes and other things and whatever. So she had a tight budget. Very good. Yeah. So again, that's the hardest thing. The hardest thing is physically to move. That I would agree. Right? That I would agree. Right? Finding a place to go, right, where you think you're going to fit in, also an issue, right? So it's part of the same issue. I would probably say. Now, at this point where it's hard and where it seems impossible, a person can flake out and say, I'm not going to do it. Because practically speaking, it's too hard and it's not going to happen, right? Let's say. But my question is, according to what God sees, it has nothing to do with me. This is what God sees. When God looks into the heart of hearts, God is going to determine whether the person could have done it or not. Right? Now, if the person could have done it, if they could have done it and they didn't, and that God understands, their punishment is multiplied by infinity. Why? Because they could have come. They could have come and been part of the Jewish people. Now, someone will say, but not everyone's meant to be Jewish. And we're not looking for converts. That's true. Right? That is very true. Right? But at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer, because this is what the Gemara says, that if you want to go in the right path, God will help you. If you don't want to go in the right path, God won't stop you. Now, even going in the right path, does that mean things are going to be easy? No. Does it mean everything's going to go the way we think and I'm going to be able to move and do this? No. This is the single biggest hurdle. Because most likely a person lives somewhere, let's say, that, if they own their house or whatever, value is not as great, certainly not. It's moving into a Jewish community. The closer you get to a Jewish, to an Orthodox synagogue, the more money it's going to cost. That's for sure. Some places totally prohibited. Yeah, it's cost prohibitive. Yeah, okay. There are a lot of places like this. I'm not saying not. That's an issue. So now, that by way of introduction, someone says, is there any point because of all this to try and convert? If they feel that this is what they're supposed to do, then they have to try and make the best effort to do it. So again, let's say in the end they don't do it. Let's say they end up as a no-hide. Okay. Yeah, let's say, very good. The judgment could still be very harsh, even if they don't make it, because God thinks they could have made it. Now you're going to say, but how do you know that? How would I know that? You don't. You think it's impossible. Nothing's impossible, per se. If God if God wills it, anything can happen. I'm not talking about, buying lottery tickets, right? I mean, within reason. Within reason. Anything can happen. You have to want it. You're right. A person can be, I've heard people say, they can't move their, let's say, disability, so to speak. And, they'd love to be Jewish and this and that, but the Jewish community should help them. Well, we got our own Jews to worry about. Not non-Jews. Let non-Jews deal with non-Jews, right? I got accused of this. Ooh, got hit over the head. You owe us. Look what I'm doing with all sacrifice. I speak to family. I have no friends left. This and that. Someone had a great idea. I come into money, I'm going to do it. Right? Believe that, right? Without a vow here, but I am going to do it. And that is set up a fund for people who need to move. People who have difficulty. Right? Because, Jews aren't going to do that. Most Jews are not going to do that. Right? Why not? Because they're going to work with Jews. Why are they going to work with non-Jews? How do you know they're real? How do you know they're not just sponging off of us? I get contact from people different countries. Like, can't tell half of them they're real or not. I tell them, okay, you want to convert? Good, move. Move to community. Whatever. Last week, I had a whole bunch of people. Some Bangladesh, so, other places. Someone in Iran, someone in Iraq. Can't tell half these people if they're real or not. Right? But, at the end of the day, I tell them, I'm not going to judge them off the cuff. I'll say, you got to move. Somehow you got to move. A lot of people don't have money, so that's also a problem, right? Or they live in a place they can't get out of, or they don't do conversions, right? Like I had someone tell me I forget where they were. And I said the closest place to them was India. So, no, I'll go to India. I said, yeah, it's a problem going to India, right? Oh, no, yeah, someone I'm in contact with. And I said, they were in Nepal. They're in Nepal of all places. They want to convert. I'm supposed to maybe speak to them this week. We'll see. But in either case, they said, where's the closest Jewish community? I said, I think India. I said, but I wouldn't go there. I said, why not? I said, because they don't do conversions there. So I said, you'd have to go either to Europe, right? Australia, probably Australia may be closer, I think, depending on, I don't know, my geography's off a little bit, right? Or go to the US or go to Canada. Now, the person has citizenship also in Switzerland. Okay. They can actually convert there because they go there, a number of months out of the year. Not gonna be so easy to convert there, but in theory they could do that, right? But again, you live in the middle of nowhere, right? Guy lives in Nepal of all places, of all places, and wants to convert. Okay, I haven't spoken to him, seen my information, still interested. Okay, very good. He ain't gonna convert in Nepal. No Jews there. I mean, you have Chabad there, but I ain't doing conversions. They're for sure not doing conversions. And if there is a community, it's tiny there. Right? So yeah. So, if you're, a regular person who lives in Nepal, you don't have so much money, where you gonna go? That's a problem. You can say I want to convert as much as you want, you gotta get out of Dodge. How's that gonna happen? Right? Now this person seems to be better off than other people, what it sounds like. So, he can move. Right? But again, part of it is it's a physical challenge, true, right? Meaning it's going to be hard financially, true, but at the end of the day, God is going to judge. It's not for me or anyone else to judge. God is going to judge. Could they have done it? Could they have done it in their heart of hearts? Now they may say, I couldn't do it. It was impossible for me to do it. So this brings up a problem because this woman who's on disability says, no, not impossible. Not impossible. I'll tell you how far it goes with a different story. Remember we went to South Africa. I've known him 30 years. So about 43 years ago, I used to go for 6 months. 6 months at a time. I'm still not quite clear how we got to South Africa, started a whole community there, whatever. And when he first got there, you see where the story's going in a second. When he first got there, he saw they were burying religious Jews, secular Jews next to religious Jews. Now that Gemara says is forbidden. because people who are liable with different death penalties, you don't bury somebody who's liable for a more severe death penalty than someone on a less severe death penalty. So he tried to stop, a funeral, that person should be buried in a different place, and they made a whole uproar. They wanted to send him back to Israel, and they claimed, he hated secular Jews, spoke very, strong against secular Jews and what they were doing, and he said he hates us when we're alive, he hates us worse when they're dead. Anyway, they totally demolished him. In the press and everything else. So he had to make a special gathering in a synagogue, right? In his synagogue to explain, right? To explain his position. So he says very simple. He said, let's say you take a non-religious person, you bury him next to a religious person. Now, what's the first thing that a person is going to get asked after they die? Right? It's contradiction. One place it says they're going to be asked, were they honest in business? Another place is going to say, did they learn Torah? Right? So let's say, did you learn Torah? That was the question. That's the first question. Did you learn Torah? So what's this person going to say? Come on, I grew up in South Africa. How many people learn Torah in South Africa? Right? You're going to claim to me I should have learned Torah? There's nothing around me. There was nothing in South Africa for me to learn Torah from. What was I supposed to do? So then what's God going to say? He says, oh, you see this guy who's buried next to you? Now that person kept Torah mitzvahs. And he grew up in South Africa. Right? He grew up there. He lived there. So if he lived there, you don't have an excuse. He lived there. And he stayed as an Orthodox Jew or became an Orthodox Jew. Now, that's bad. I mean, not for this guy that kept Shabbos. That's good. Right? For this other person, that's bad. Why? Because he's going to make the claim, I never could have learned anything because my environment. There was nothing around. He said, but this guy did. So my Rebbe said, if you take a secular person and you bury him next to a religious person, that's going to be really bad for a secular person. Yeah, it's going to be, God's going to look down to that and say, come on, you had an opportunity, you didn't. Right? You didn't take the opportunity. This person took the opportunity. Right? This person took the opportunity. So in that story, the head of the burial society, the Chevra Kadisha that every Jewish community has, also wasn't religious. But when he heard this, it made sense and they stopped doing it. They stopped burying non-religious people next to religious people. Very good. Now, what's the point? God sees. This is exactly the point. God sees what a person's holding. So this person says, we'll make it more graphic, make it very clear. This person says, what do you want from me? I never could have done that. There's nobody around me. God says, look at the person next to you. The person next to you is living proof you could have done it. But you didn't. Right? So that's worse for you. So that means that's not an excuse for you. So God's going to look, so the point is, God's going to look in the heart of everybody. And God's going to say, a person decided they couldn't convert, whatever reason, right? They're going to stay in Ohio, okay. God's going to see if that's true or not. And if he sees they couldn't have done anything, it was beyond their capability, right? Let's say you get a free pass. And if God says no, you just use this as an excuse, and you were really lazy, doesn't matter how hard it was, you could have done it, and God sees deep within, and he sees what you could have done, you're toast. You're absolute toast. Yeah? Forget, I don't know, a person's going to get a portion of the world to come. I don't know if they're going to get zapped or not. They're going to get anything. Because God saw you had an opportunity. You could have done it. Now, God will tell you straight away, you're right, it wasn't supposed to be easy. Right? You thought it was harder than it was. You made it out to be like this gigantic mountain. I agree. It was a mountain. There were hurdles. There 100% were hurdles. But you could have got there. You could have gone there. It's possible. Whether you think it's possible or not, possible. Now, again, I'm not going to say in every case. Certainly not in every case. Right? But again, that's not for me to judge. right? So persons ask, okay, so let's go back to the question since I answered everything except the question itself, right? And the question is there any point to keep trying? Depends on the person. I would think, yeah, it's worthwhile, right? Now, if a person says, I have no interest in converting, and I only want to stay in Noahide, okay, that's also legit. No one says you have to convert, right? No one's putting a gun to your head and saying convert or die. We're just going to have a portion of the world to come. It is a valid option, right? If God wanted everyone to be Jewish, everybody would be Jewish. There's a point of being a non-Jew and not converting. Yeah. So if a person really believes that and that's their purpose, that's the purpose. All right. They have intention to convert, to learn what they need to learn, okay. Right. But if they really want to convert, they have to make the best effort. They have to make the best effort to try. Now, again, this is going to be a problem. Right? Moving's going to be a problem. Age, yeah, certainly also going to be an issue. And no question. Yeah. So the bottom line is I can't say what God's going to say. If a person made every effort and they couldn't do it, they couldn't do it. Then they couldn't do it. Yeah, and then they get a free pass. But if they really wanted to, they spent so much time trying to do it, and they gave up. Okay, it's also part of it. Now God could say they're legitimately giving up, and that's it. Right? God can certainly say that. They have a legitimate reason, or not. But again, that's not for me to judge. You want to know what should you keep doing? I would think if a person was intent, their full intent was to convert, then that's what they should do. They should work very hard to do it. To the best of their ability. Again, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be given, it's not going to be given to you on a platter. Okay. Right. That's for sure. But at the end of the day, right. That's it. So that God will judge. Right. But I would think if a person been doing this for so long, and that's their intent, they should do it. They should continue to do it. Right. When they get there at the end or not, I can't say. Right. I know someone, recently had a very hard time, very hard community to convert and this and that, and whatever, but eventually persevered. It took years. Yeah, okay. There are other factors, going in their favor, but still, the brother doesn't have a lot of money, could move to, a stronger Jewish community, probably still can't, right, because of that, but whatever, they persevered, they were able to do it. Not everyone necessarily is able to do it, but the question is, they're not able to do it. Why? Why aren't they able to do it? And is that going to be a legitimate excuse in God's eyes? So I would tell you, if they're not sure, that's a different issue. But if a person's been bent going on this path and they're learning, they're trying, they should do their best to do it. That's what they should do. Whether they get there or not, okay, but at least they made the effort. They continue to make the effort. If they're not going to convert anyway, so fine. A different issue, right? That'd be a different issue. That is what I would. That's what I would say, right? And everyone agrees. Everyone agrees they are going to be hardships. No one disagrees. What people have issue with is, or some have issue with is that's too hard. Then they make it really too hard. But again, we'll make a big distinction here. We mentioned before about medical school. Yeah. First year of medical school, 15% are weeded out. I think it's 30%, I think. It's higher. I think it's 30%. Get weeded out. Second year, I think it's like 15%. 15 or 10% get weeded out. But if you made it by the third year, you're probably going to make it. So this is also the same thing, right? But it's a very small percentage that actually finish, like less than 20%, right? Actually finish. So I'm not going to say all these people weren't sincere. Maybe some more, some less. Now, it could be if someone gave up in the process and just said, okay, I can't do it, this and that. Again, God is going to judge them. right? Could the person have done it or not? That's not something, I'm going to call and say, oh, you could have done it, you didn't do it, this, that. Money's a real issue, right? It's definitely a real issue, right? But, if someone says they're on disability and they scrimped and they saved and this and that, and they were able to do it, then that might be not so good for other people because they can do it, why can't you do it? Yeah, so you say maybe that, okay, they weren't paying rent, right? Or they weren't paying other things that they have to pay. Oh, whatever, right? But this is the thing that she said, right? And that is, can't make that excuse because I'm living proof I can do it. I did it. And they scrimped and they saved and this and that. And they did it, right? And they made 10 trips in a minivan with all their stuff back and forth to Memphis. That's insane. I remember once speaking like, dead zone, some snowstorm. I'm like, you there? Hello? You live? Whatever. But that's mysterious efforts. That's self-sacrifice. What happens? Someone tries to convert, but the rabbis don't accept the conversion. Okay, it's a different issue. Now, the question is like this. Someone converts. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as a universal conversion. It should be. Right? But there are different criteria, different rabbinical courts. Now, just because somebody doesn't accept it doesn't mean it's not good. It could be valid. It could very well be valid. Some places have higher stringencies, than others. There's certain rabbinical courts, unfortunately, that, I know of certain places where someone converts an ex-rabbinical court, they won't accept them. They don't think the standard's high enough. Now, that also can happen. So what do you do in that situation? Yeah, so if they don't accept it, so if you want to accept it by everybody, go through another conversion. Right? That's why we say if you're going to do it, you try and do the best you can, right? That everyone's going to accept it. Now, can it happen where, something happens, to the one who was doing the conversion, and now the conversions they do are quasi good? That can happen. I know it happened to somebody that one of the rabbis got thrown off the rabbinical court for certain things, so they had a stringent conversion. Okay, right, but it's easier for them because they already went through an Orthodox synagogue. They came to Israel on the right of return, right? They made Aliyah. So okay, they got their kids in the school, not a problem, but they had to go through a stringent conversion. Can that happen? Yeah, that can happen. Is it common? I wouldn't say it's common. Right? Someone would say, can you guarantee? I can't guarantee anything, right? I won't guarantee anything. I'll guarantee my work is good. I'll guarantee I'll write a letter for people, right? Certainly that, and I'll try and send them to the best rabbinical court. Even if it's not in their area per se, right? There won't be questions. Or if the rabbinical court, I don't think it's necessarily so good, but they want to. It's only one around that's recognized by the chief rabbinate in Israel, and they want to come to Israel. Okay. Yeah. Even if I don't think it's necessarily that good, it doesn't really matter because, if they took my classes and my classes are good, my work is good. So, that shouldn't be an issue. But are there rabbinical courts that say that they won't accept other rabbinical courts? Yeah, it happens. Right? It happens. So again, you want to go to the strongest rabbinical court possible. So no one's ever going to question it. Could somewhere down the line something happen where it could get questioned? Yes. Is it common? I wouldn't say it's so common. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to give a guarantee on that. I'm not going to give a 100% guarantee, right? But I would say that any rabbinical court, if it's a strong rabbinical court, you should have no problem. Should absolutely have, you should absolutely have no problem. That's now if they don't accept it, so then you have to go through like a stringent conversion, or go through, another rabbinical court that they would recommend, or if they have their own rabbinical court or whatever the case is, right? But the goal is, you want to be accepted by as many people as possible, right? By as many rabbinical courts as possible, so you don't have that problem, right? But again, it's easier said than done. right? But in my experience over the last 20 years, I basically have seen that the rabbinical courts that are strong and very strong, no issues. No one will ever be called. No one ever will be, called out on it. Somebody asked, "Am I saying Gemara is found in Daf Yomi?" No, I'm saying that Gemara, 2 pages. The Talmud is made up of the Mishnah and the Gemara. Mishnah is commentary on the Torah. Gemara is a commentary on the Mishnah. The Mishnah and the Gemara together makes up the Talmud. So if you would learn, there are 39 tractates of Talmud, 6 orders, right? 6 orders. You got things about marriage, divorce, 1 order, noshim. The Zikin is about damages, and all that. Moed is about the holidays. For the most part, Zraim about agricultural laws. For the most part, then you have Kachim and Taras. Kachim is laws about sacrifices. Taras about purity and impurity. Laws, different things. So you have 6 orders that make up the entire Talmud. So Daf Yomi means that you have 1 page, that you have 2 pages. The person would learn 2 pages of Talmud a day, then you would learn the entire Talmud in 7.5 years. Right? That's what Daf Yomi is. The Daf is just a page. It means a page in Hebrew. Right? And Yomi means every day. Right? So Daf Yomi means you're doing 2 pages. Really, Daf means 2 pages. Right? So you're really doing 2 pages a day. 2 pages a day, meaning front and back. You would finish the entire Talmud in 7.5 years. Someone here says, E-Team says, which is an organization that deals with converts, among other things here in Israel. Chief Rabbinate, thumbs down. Yeah. The problem with the rabbinate, Chief Rabbinate, a lot of places don't accept what they do. Again, it's not the end to end all things, but if a person wants to live in Israel, it has to be accepted by the chief rabbinate. So, I'm not a big fan of them, but, because they've had problems. They've had problems throughout the years with some quasi-conversions as well. So it's kind of it is kind of a problem. But again, if it's done properly and a person had it there, it should be accepted, right? And, in general, each one based on its own merits. Right, there were 5,000 number of years ago. 5,000 conversions that went through the chief rabbinate through the army, right? Army conversions. Yeah, and that was the problem because a lot of those conversions people didn't take on mitzvahs. We don't take on mitzvahs. That means the conversion's it's not valid. 5,000. I mean, that's a lot of conversions. That chief rabbinate sort of rubber stamped. Whatever, they've had their own issues, but it's the only game in town, right? They have a monopoly on it, okay, but if you want to live here, you have to go through them, right? It has to be accepted by them, right? They have a rabbinical court that's accepted by them, okay, right? Again, a lot of people say that I just want to go through the chief rabbinate and I want to come to Israel and whatever. I don't know, it's bad news. That's why at some point, I want to start something here. Is whatever, like I don't want to call it a conversion center, I wouldn't call it that, but like a learning center, right? A learning center for Jews and non-Jews, right? Noah hides as well, where you have people that actually come and actually convert, overseen, by the chief rabbinate. People say, oh, but chief rabbinate is not any great shake. If the person wants to live here, you have to go through them, right? You have no choice, right? You have to. You'll get health insurance otherwise. In general, you can't get a job, right? Per se, it won't be legal here, right? So you want, there are other rabbinical courts that are worth its weight in gold, but they're not, recognized by chief rabbinate, which doesn't mean they're bad, per se. So anyway, it's one of my long-term goals, to do it properly, so to speak. But it's a big problem here, not only is it a big problem going to the chief rabbinate, it's just a problem living here while you're trying to do it because you have to have a visa that's valid, right? And it's very hard to get a visa that's going to be valid for a certain amount of time, right? And if it's not valid, they won't deal with you, right? It has nothing to do with conversion, but they don't want people necessarily coming here and just converting and leaving, right? Also, so whatever, it's a problem, right? It's a problem. It's something, it's on my horizon, to try and do something like that. But like everything else, takes it takes three things, kesef, guilt, and money, right? All mean the same thing. So, but whatever, it has to be done, has to be done the right way. There are a bunch of programs here that I would never recommend anybody to do. And some of these programs, the only programs that are accepted, by the chief rabbinate, but big deal. They're not very thorough. And not only that, we mentioned many times that conversion has nothing to do with knowing Israeli history. And there are some places that will teach you Israeli history also, which has nothing to do with conversion. He needs to know blessings, kashrus, 13 principles of faith, all the holidays, Hebrew, right? Laws of Shabbos. I mean, Israeli history has nothing to do with anything. You want to learn it on your own, very good. Like, why should that be part of the curriculum? To kiss the Israeli flag to convert, it has nothing to do with anything, right? In general. But anyway, it's one of my goals. One of my goals is to do something like that. Maybe it's more of the same. Abuse isn't better to be in the Jewish world. Yeah, it's definitely better to be in the Jewish world, right? There's no question. The secular world is just whatever. It's just a mess, right? It's a total, it's a total, it's a total mess, and that's why in the one Orthodox community, you have 2 feet. You have 2 feet in that secular world. You're in trouble, right? Because Torah is not going to be the most important thing. Right? If you were to ask, I shouldn't laugh, it's kind of sad, but if you were to ask, one Orthodox parents, again, not all of them, I'm not going to throw all of them under the bus, but if you would ask them, what would you want? Let's say they had a son, what would you want your son to be? As a profession, accountant, lawyer, doctor, actuary, rabbi. Yeah, or none of the above. Now, most will pick the top 4. Rabbi will almost never get picked. Almost. But some people say, yeah, I want my son to be a rabbi. Okay. Yeah. It's not a value. The value is in the higher things, being a lawyer, doctor, actuary, I don't know, whatever. Going to real estate, I don't know, going to marketing, do other things, be a rabbi? Like, no. Like, not a good profession for, for a nice Jewish boy. But it's not on the horizon for most. They don't want that. Now you could say, well, they don't make a lot of money and they got to do a lot of things, try and make ends meet or whatever. Okay, maybe that's part of it. Maybe. Yeah, but it's more prestige to be a doctor, lawyer, and accountant. Much more prestige. Yeah, I was at Yeshiva University for a year. There were people there learning the rabbinical school and becoming, lawyers at the same time. Right? Law school, rabbinical school at the same time. Rabbi doctor. Could be the rabbi doctor. Whatever. I don't know if they're ever going to use the rabbinic degree or not or whatever. But okay. But again, if you want to be anything in this world, you got to be all in. Right? That's the point. You have to be all in. If you're not all in, it'll be a hodgepodge. And the secular world is so powerful. We mentioned this many times. The secular world is so powerful, it will have much more effect on you than you on it. Right? In general. If people say, oh, if Judaism was so strong, you don't have to worry about this and that. No, it's not a question of Judaism not being strong. It's the power of the secular world. Right? A person works, let's say, in a secular workplace. Right? Let's say a woman, because I know a bunch of women have told me this, and they dress the part of being an Orthodox Jew and they get flack. It's 95 degrees out, it's boiling hot out. You're covered up and you're wearing thigh highs or stockings or whatever, and like they just never let you live it down. Or modesty is you're shaking hands and this, and come on, it's medieval and this and that. People beat you down. I mean, not physically, obviously, but they say all kinds of things. They act in a certain way, and they think like you're just like whack them. But they're not afraid to express their opinion. It's not about live and let live. They just say things. Oh, here comes, medieval so-and-so. Like, you don't want to hear that. You definitely don't want to hear that. It's not about live and let live. People have to make comments. People have to say things. Like, come on, aren't you hot? Someone told me this 2 weeks ago. I said, yeah, it's hot. You're dressing in black and white or whatever. It's hot. I said, you're right, it's hot. Right? I said, you know what? But you're wearing a t-shirt and shorts. You're also hot. I said, you're just as hot as me. They're like, no, you're attracting the sun. I'm not as hot, but you're also hot. Well, it's 95 degrees, it's hot. You're right. So if I'm wearing, let's say, a white shirt, let's say, even if it's short sleeve, okay. But if I'm wearing a suit, you're right, it's hot. It's hot. Yeah. Let's say I'm not as hot. You're also boiling hot. Right? So there are degrees. The degrees how much you're going to sweat. Okay. But again, what is that? That's just a jibe to say like you're crazy. Like why would you dress all covered up when it's 95 degrees? Because that's the uniform God wants me to wear. Yeah. You're like you're ready to go out to a ball game. I'm here serving God, just the way I'm dressed. Yeah, there's a difference. Yeah, it's a big difference, but people don't, they have to think about modesty issues, other things. But what's the first thing they're gonna do? They're gonna say, that's weird. That's weird. It's so hot. Why would you do that? Yeah, because they want to justify it. You don't have to do it. It's stupid. Right? Oh, so modesty issues you understand. Like, but that's medieval. That's, you have a bus where, certain lines where, women get in the back, men get in the front, so you don't have interaction. They pass each other. Someone once said, didn't you ever hear of what's her name? What's her name? One second. Who was it? Rosa Parks. That was her name. Rosa Parks, right? Did you ever hear of Rosa Parks? She refused to get, go in the back of the bus. And one thing have to do with another. This is people want to hold by higher levels of modesty. Obviously, not all buses do that. Regular public buses don't do that. Okay. But they're choosing to do that. They'll think it's crazy. Why can't men and women sit together in certain places? They can. Okay. Well, why do they sit separate? For modesty reasons. That's why they do. Okay, I mean, can't enforce it. Can't necessarily enforce it, right? But most people know. You get on the bus. Yeah, guys get in the front, women get in the back. They don't mix. Yeah, sometimes you don't have a choice. Whatever. Okay. What do you do? The back. A lot of times, or sometimes, the back door doesn't work, so everyone has to go in the front, right? You have to go through the front door. Okay. I mean, it's not the greatest thing, but again, there are different levels of modesty, and people think that's crazy. People think that's medieval, but I said people are choosing how they're brainwashed. Anyone can leave. There's a 10% dropout rate. Anyone can leave if they want. Yeah, but they choose it. Modesty makes sense, right? In many ways. Yeah, we've spoken about this. I don't have to harp on this, right? But people think it's just totally crazy. They think it's just insane. Yeah. And they just think it's bad. They'll make fun of it because that way they make it sound like it's really stupid, it's really backwards, so they don't have to do it. Yeah, somebody asks, why would Ethan go against you for having it for converted? I just told you. If I'll tell you a story. Somebody, we don't think all the conversions are bad, but they've had a lot of cases. They had a lot of cases where the conversion was bad. Yeah, let me give one example. Someone contacted me. I don't know how they got my number, but whatever, they contacted me. This is a number of years ago. And seemingly it was an Orthodox Jew. And they were interested in dating someone who went to the army. I said, okay. So I said, why are you calling me? So well, they said they had a conversion in the army. Now, a conversion in the army is done by the chief rabbinate. Yeah. So I said, okay, so what's the question? They said, well, I said, well, I said, okay, let me ask. I said, does this woman keep kosher? No. I said, does she keep Shabbos? No. I said, does she dress modestly? No. So my next question was, so why want to date her? Right? That was my next question. So the person came back and said, but what type of conversion was it? I said, it was done by the chief rabbinate. Yeah. But you see, she didn't take on the mitzvahs, right? I mean, if she at the outset had no intention of ever keeping the mitzvahs, then it's not a conversion, it's nothing. Now, if she did, and she was keeping certain things and then she stopped, okay, that's like any Jew that went off, right? But I don't think this is the case, right? So this is one case. I know of other cases. I know of other cases like this, where they converted through them, not just in the army, converted through the chief rabbinate, they're not religious. Right? They were never religious. Now, can some rabbinical courts get fooled? Yes. They can get fooled, right? But I'm not even talking about that. I'm not even talking about that. So you have many cases, many cases where the conversions are valid, right? Shouldn't they be up to the highest standard? They should be. They should be. Yeah. Maybe some of them are good. Maybe. I can say all of them are bad. But I remember a number of years ago, many years ago, where I was at a wedding of one of my Rebbe's grandkids, and three of them came up to me, pushed me up against the wall, and said, "You have anything to do with these 5,000 conversions in the army?" I'm like, "No." I said, my nose is clean, get off me. I'm like, nothing to do with this. Yeah, 5,000 conversions went through the army. Yeah, not one of them were spit, in my estimation. Not worth very much. How can that be? How can that be? So I told my Rebbe son, I said, listen, if they're getting kickbacks, I want some of that. They're like, no, you don't want that money. You don't want that money. Yeah. So now I'm going to ask the $1.5 million question. And the $1.5 million question is, how can that be done? 5,000 over a short period of time. That's a lot. That's a lot. 5,000? Yeah. And most of them not taking on Torah mitzvahs, that's a problem. That's a serious problem. So now let's rephrase the question. Yeah. Why would they say that they're not good? Because they darn well know a lot of them are not good. All of them. Right? There are probably plenty that are okay. Yeah, probably. Probably. But there have been a lot of cases they weren't okay. So when you get enough cases that aren't okay, what does it do? It makes you question. That's what it does. It makes you question what they do. Yeah. Yeah. It makes you question. Say, but it should be, right? It should be on the up and up. Okay. It should be. Yeah, it should be. But what happens? Right? But what happens? Yeah. They do things they shouldn't do. Why? Could be any number of reasons. If somebody was doing conversions, let's say 30, 40 years ago, they were good conversions. And then like 10 years ago or more, say 15 years ago, they started doing things that, converted people they shouldn't have converted, different things. So it gave all the conversions a bad name. Now, what about the ones done 30 years ago? They're probably good, but someone knows that, these conversions aren't really so valid now. They'll probably do a stringent conversion just to make sure there's no question. But, can someone do things they shouldn't do later? Sure. I'm not saying they should. Can they? I mean, anything can happen. But I'm saying, major rabbinical courts, that I've sent to, I've never had a problem. Never had a problem with someone going off afterwards. Never had a problem with someone with a rabbinical court. Now, again, it's not a guarantee. It's certainly not a guarantee, but keep in mind, things can happen. Things can happen. If, as I said before, I won't give a guarantee, but I will say if it's a proper rabbinical court, you should have no problems. 20 years down the line, 50 years down the line, should never be a question. Should never be a question. And with top rabbinical courts, you will not have that. You will not have that issue. Again, can I say 100% it'll never happen? No. I can say 100% death and taxes, yes. I can't say 100%. I can say it's a very high percentage it won't happen. For sure it won't happen. Right? I can't guarantee it. I'm not going to guarantee that. Right? Which rabbinical court is good in South Florida? Miami. Based in Miami is good. I think they're accepted in Israel also. Right? One in Miami is good. There are a couple in Miami, but there's what's it called? Let me just bring it up here. South Florida Professional Rabbinical Court. Yeah, that's what I think it is. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, it's inside the Miami Beach Community College. That's where it is. I met some of the rabbis there, so I know. And they know me, I know them. So it's where the Miami Beach Community College is. If you know where that is. So that's probably the best one in what do you call it, in Florida, in Miami. So like I said, I sent people there, and rabbinical court knows me. They know my work. They should definitely remember who I am. But again, the rabbinical courts in the Kollel itself, wherever the Miami Kollel is in Miami. I was there one. The rabbinical court's right there. Right, it's in the same. What do you call it? It's in the same place. Right. So again, there are some rabbinical courts better than others. I'll tell you a story. Someone here who I see on a regular basis because he prays in the Rabbi synagogue in the afternoon when I'm there. So I wanted to ask him. He's on the rabbinical court for the chief rabbinate for divorce cases. So I asked him. There are certain kibbutzim here in Israel that do that whenever they teach for conversion, and the chief rabbinate, they have a connection to chief rabbinate. Chief rabbinate, will certify these converts are good. So I asked him, how many of these, conversions can you rely on? From these, there are like 2 kibbutzim that do this. So I said, how many can you rely on? So he said, Hashem Yerachim. Hashem Yerachim means heaven forbid. God should have mercy. I said, come on, give me a number. Give me a number. So he told me maybe 1 in 1,000. That's what he told me. Now, it could be he's exaggerating, right? He said 1 in 1,000, but I will tell you what he told me, though. He said if somebody comes to get divorced, right? They can't help them, whatever, they have to get divorced. If they know this person had a conversion, if they know they had a conversion, one of these kibbutzim through the rabbinate, they'll do something on the bill of divorce to make it invalid. Right? Now, why is that? Because they don't have to make it valid with proper witnesses and all that. What's the reason? Because the person's not Jewish. They didn't have a proper conversion. Right? So he told me anytime. This is what he said. He's been doing this for decades. He told me anytime this happens, and we see that this person, that's where they converted, so the bill of divorce looks different. He said they won't accept it. He's part of the chief rabbinate. I mean, he's shouldn't say chief rabbinate, whatever. He's on the rabbinical court of the chief rabbinate. Yeah, for divorce. When it comes to conversion, even done by the chief rabbinate in this case, they reject it. They reject it outright because they know. 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000. Yeah. So it's a problem. That's why a lot of places will not accept conversions from the chief rabbinate for exactly that reason. Right? For exactly that reason. Somebody mentioned, I just want to point out back to back to reform. Someone had said, which I wanted to mention before, but I got carried away in other things, that they remember going to Reform synagogue and asked not to wear black and white and not to use a black or gray kippah because they look too religious. Right? If you come into a Reform synagogue, at least look the part. Don't look like you're too religious. Right? In my book, like, okay, so certain things they don't want. Certain things they don't want. Yeah, there's a story, someone I think either has become a religious or is a convert. I forget which. And this Reform rabbi had never put on tefillin before. Right? It could be BYT before YouTube, right? So this person took him into a back room, showed him how to put on tefillin. Like, how could a Reform rabbi not know how to put on tefillin? I mean, there are a lot of stories. There are a lot of stories. I mean, it's very, very, very watered down. Very watered down. Right? So, person goes that route. Will it be easier? Yes. Will it be meaningful? I don't know. Maybe. I had to tell you another story. Person wanted to convert and knew whatever. They go through Reform conversion. They understand Reform. It wasn't for them. But and they know it's not true. They really want to have an Orthodox conversion. But what was the issue? They paid for it. They paid for the course already. Now they couldn't get around the fact they paid for the course already. And they were like almost finished. So it kept coming around the same thing. So I told them, I said, listen, just say you gave money to a bad charity, and that's it, and move on. Because it's not worth the, it's not worth the money, the paper that it's written on. So I said, yeah, but I paid for it. So it's like going around and around and around the same thing. But I paid for it, But it's not worth anything, but I paid for it. Okay. So I told them, I said, okay. I said, I'll give you an experiment to do. Just to show you what level of knowledge that they don't have. I said, ask your Reform rabbi. You can't open up a screen, right? You can't go on ChatGPT. You can't go on, any screen, any device, right? And you ask him, what's the blessing over strawberry and why? I said, get back to me with an answer. Yeah. I said, just ask him that. I don't ask him anything about Shabbos. I said, ask him about the strawberry, what's the blessing? That was it. First never contacted me after that. Now, why would they know what the blessing is? They don't make blessing. So you need to make blessing. Whatever it is. Maybe over certain things, but not that. So they wouldn't know what the issue is. It's a shrub, it's a tree. Really it should be bright eggs, right? But it really grows, close to the ground. It's less than 9, what do you call it? Whatever. It's it's very short to the ground. Whatever. So we look at it like it comes to the ground, so the blessing's very double. But they would never know that. They would never know that. Yeah, why not? It's obvious. They don't want Jewish law. So it's a much more watered down version. But again, what's this person saying? We're not going to have a chance to do it for real. So we don't have a chance to do it for real. Let me do this. But you hear what you're saying? It's not valid. It's just cutting corners. Yeah, but, and there are people out there, unfortunately, right? All they care about is having the name. They, even if no one recognizes it, they want to have the name, that they're a Jew. Kaufman's law is, as we always say, if you're going to do it, you do it right. That's it. That's it. Right? If you're not going to do it, don't bother. But don't turn it into a pretzel. Don't do a Mickey Mouse type of thing, because that's what it's worth. So it says, find out the boundaries of the RCA where they validate a basis. The RCA has their own basis, but they didn't. They have their own basis. If you're in a place where it's too far to go to a RCA base, the Rabbinical Council of America base, and could they send you somewhere else in a base they recognize? They could, right? That they could. They're also pretty good, right? Zionistic leaning also, but whatever. There are people that don't want that. They want straight ultra-Orthodox based, no frills, so to speak. Yeah. And, you have a number of them. That's not an issue, right? And question where a person lives. Okay. But yeah, you could go to a basin where, where the RCA will validate it. Good. You could do that. Right? Or they would tell you, forget it, just go to one of our bate dinner, right? If you go through them. Right? Or one they recognize, either way. Either way, that certainly can be done. Right? That certainly could be certainly could be done. But one thing also, I just want to harp on this for a second, that a person, let's say, go to a certain Orthodox synagogue and say, we don't do conversions. Right? So partially that's a blow off. Yeah, because they don't need to do conversions. Right? As long as you go to a base, then what do you need this rabbi do the conversion? You don't need him to do conversion. Right? Now, a person needs to be taught, so they're taking class online, very good. But what do they need? They need a sponsoring rabbi. Yeah, they're not going to ask them straight away. You never ask rabbis straight away if they don't know who you are, right? Sponsor them. I can't do that because I don't live there, but you need someone, on the ground. But but it's also, it's also a way to blow someone off and say, well, we don't do conversions. Well, that's fine. You don't need them to do conversions. Now, if they say, there are two different things here. If they say we don't accept converts, okay, that's a different issue. No matter who does the conversion, they won't accept it. Okay. Right? And there are a few communities like that will not accept any conversion. Right? By the Syrian Jews, they don't accept any conversion. They had a problem years ago, and that was it. Right? So they, it's a part of the what do you call it? Part of their charter is no conversion. We don't accept any conversion. Right? And so people bring that up as an issue. So don't move to the Syrian community. So you won't be part of the Syrian community. Okay. There are plenty of other communities the person can join. But they don't want issues. They don't want issues, period. They don't want issues. That's it. Right? But to say they don't do conversions, that may be blowing you off just to say, well, go somewhere else. Right? But you don't need them to do conversion. You need someone to vouch for you on the ground that says keep kosher, keep Shabbos. Okay. But I wouldn't ask them that straight away anyway because they don't know who you are. It's also an issue, but people get thrown off by that also. They say, well, they don't do conversions. Okay. Now, if they say we don't deal with converts in general, and you got to find your own way, but it's not going to be here, that's a different issue. Right? That's not the same thing. Definitely not. They could say that. Right? They could say that. As well. But these are two different things. Just because they don't do conversions doesn't mean the person can't convert. Now, if they say we don't accept conversions, we don't do conversions, in this city, okay, so then, you ask them, okay, but, am I allowed to go to the synagogue? And if I'm taking another class, I can go to a different rabbinical court. Can I come to the synagogue? So then you have to see at what level. At what level they won't do it. Yeah, that's a different issue, right? But you could have that also. Right? Saw someone a number of months ago. Yeah, this person now lives, whatever, a certain community. And so I asked him, what do you do about, he was only there for a few months, he's from here, and whatever, went to do outreach there. So I asked him, I said, what do you do about converts? If someone wants to convert. So tell them, that's my field. So he says, we tell them we don't deal with it. We don't, you have to, find someone else, but we don't, because they got burned. There are communities that will not, just deal with converts in general because they got burned. False converts. Got a problem. Yeah. And there are some places that, rabbinical courts will not deal with it. Say it's discrimination. It says, okay, but you had a few bad eggs, they got burned. They got burned by it, so they say that's it. We're not, it's too hard. And there are places like that. So yeah, you got to find a place, A, it's going to be accepting. Anywhere out of New York and New Jersey would be more accepting, right? And B, that even if they don't have a rabbinical court there, okay, so, they can send you somewhere, right? Definitely can send you somewhere, to do it. But just because they don't do conversions doesn't mean you can't go to their synagogue, and it doesn't mean they necessarily won't vouch for you, right? You have to see how far that goes. It's usually a smokescreen. And the first thing they'll probably tell you is, stays a non-Jew is easier, which is true. It is true. It's a long, arduous process. No, there's no question. Hard, right? It's hard, it's costly, it's other things. Yeah. It's, across the board. Very good. Right? Only the few are going to survive. But if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. I know people that got so fed up with the process, they had a very difficult time trying to have an Orthodox conversion, so they had, conservative conversion. Made it easier. Now again, could they have persevered? God will judge that. It's not for me to judge. Right? And God died that they could have persevered, so they're in trouble. Right? I mean, I've heard a number of cases. A number of cases where they said they made it impossible. Okay. I know of a recent case, someone converted. And yeah, they also made it impossible. It was a very hard place to convert. But guess what? With all the complaining and all the fetching and all this and all that, they ended up converting. They ended up finishing. It took them a while. It was hard. Right? It was hard, but they did it. It's not impossible. Even an impossible place is not totally impossible. Right? If there's a will, there's a way. But, it's not going to be easy. And no one's expecting it to be easy. But everyone will say, it doesn't have to be this hard. Okay. Some places make it way too hard. I would agree. It doesn't have to be, so impossible. Right? Within reason. But if it's within reason, and they think it's impossible, okay, it's their problem. Right? But there's a lot to know. Someone asked, I'll just end with this. Whatever, same topic. Question comes up, a person learns, however long they've learned, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it may be. How do you know when you're ready? Yeah, that's a good question. How do you know? So if a person, I would say, it's gone over, the most important laws, Shabbos, blessings, and they keep reviewing and they seem to know things down pat. Yeah. Down pat. Like I'm not saying they gotta know everything. I'll say most things. Most things, but they've been learning for a long time. Right? At least a year. If they feel they have a real command, right? So then they might be ready. Then they might be ready. If they feel there's just so much to know and they don't have a handle on it, okay, it's a different issue. Question is, what level of a handle do they have on it? That's the question. Right? That is right. That's the question. A Beis Din is not looking to see everything. They want to see you have a working command, the blessings, kashrus, Shabbos, right? And you know what you're talking about. Does that mean they don't, they couldn't stump you? They could easily stump you, right? But they want to see, they want to see what level. That's part of my job. Someone thinks, they're ready, then I'll grill them and I'll see what they know. And if they answer enough things, in the right direction, then they're probably ready. Doesn't mean they're gonna know everything. I had somebody, a certain basin set me up with somebody. They wanted to learn, what do they want to learn? Shabbos. What do they want to learn some Shabbos? Certain things. So, I sent them information. And then I gave them an opportunity to ask whatever question they had during the week. So they had a good working knowledge. They wanted this person to work on the laws of Shabbos, right? Based it. So I said, okay. So they had a good working knowledge. They for sure had a good working knowledge. There were gaps. There were gaps in things they weren't, clear on, but these things were hard things, but things you have to know. Right? Things you have to know. So how long did I do that for? Like a few months, 2-3 months. I think. I mean, whatever. I mean, they they went through certain topics, and then they asked, pick my brain on a lot of different things, on those topics, and saw like where they were stronger, where they were weaker, and other questions came up also, with other things. But again, this person ended up converting because they had enough working knowledge. I mean, they were weak in certain areas, right? But those areas covered. So since those areas got covered, and then they got grilled on it, and then they had a better working knowledge. So, so that was it. So that would be my, that would be, that would be my answer. So it's any students of mine, I would say, okay, person, been learning for a while. That's at least a year, I would say. And I think they have working knowledge, and I'll grill them. Right? Then, I'll set up a time to speak, and I'll grill them and see what, not that I'm looking to catch them, but to see what type of working knowledge they have. And if they have good enough working knowledge, then they live within walking distance, then they should go. Right? But, if let's say I ask 10 questions on a lot of different things, and 8 out of 10 they can't answer, or they stumble. So then they have what to work on. Right? But if they're in the ballpark, so that should be good. That should be good enough. Right? Depends what level they know. Right? Which is why, I should send out tests and questions and this and that, which I don't, but I probably should. Keep people honest, and see if they grasp material. But for most people, you have to do that, on your own. The only way you're going to do it is review, and you just got to keep reviewing, and living what you're doing. When you make blessings, and if you made a mistake, what do you have to do if you made a mistake, and and Shabbos and other things. I'd have to see. I'd have to determine that, right? That I'd have to, determine. But if someone can answer like this, and they get most of the questions right, then they're probably ready. Right now, when they go in front of a beis din, basically can say, they can say, oh, maybe you have to learn a little bit more of this, or a little bit more of that, or, something else. Or they could say, they're ready. I had somebody actually went to South Florida. My first student went to South Florida, and they were in Tampa at the time. And I sent them when I was in the States. I was living in the States. I sent them to convert, and basically called me up, and they asked me all kinds of questions because, what I was doing was strange and this and that. So then they asked me who my rabbinic scholar was, and my das Torah, and I told them, and okay, that was basically the end of the discussion. I told them I had to speak to the sponsor rabbi, whatever. 2 weeks later, this person was ready to convert. They were ready to convert. They knew their stuff backwards and forwards. So basically got back to me and said, we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? They said, you said that someone was ready to convert. I said, exactly, convert them. I said, do your job, convert them. I said, that's why I sent them. I said, I would send someone normally if they're not ready to convert. It's a waste of your time, waste of my time. I said, but if they're ready to convert, I'm going to send them. Yeah. And if you think they have the knowledge, then you're going to convert them. So they were a little bit miffed because, they didn't, they couldn't watch over them. They couldn't ask them. They were ready to convert, right? They didn't have any control over you, right? I took control right away from them, but they're ready to convert. So I sent them when they're ready to convert. Now they could say, okay, read this book, read that book, do other things, we'll be in contact, this, that. But they saw they were ready to convert. They saw what knowledge they had, right? So again, are they looking for every last thing they're going to know? No. But they want to see they have working knowledge. They have to speak to the sponsor rabbi on the ground, right? And all that, but very good. That's what they, but they have to have the knowledge, right? So if I think they have the knowledge, I'll send them. I'll definitely send them. Because I certainly don't want to, let anyone make me look stupid. Even, I still have a reputation somewhere. So, but if they have, enough knowledge, then yeah, then it's up to them. Then the basin will say, okay, either you do or you don't, or you have to work on this, you have to work on that. I've had a few people that work on certain things. Okay, right? But again, that has nothing necessarily to do with me. It's just places that they were weak on. That's what I would answer on that. Yeah. Any other questions? when they says by Reform congregation, they were told they were making the congregation uncomfortable. Yeah, it can't be too religious. Can't be too religious in a non-religious place. Yeah, that I hear. That's just pathetic. But someone here says, okay, last thing here is someone says that we've been protecting Judaism for eons. Some feel like an interloper wanting to convert. You're not an interloper, right? But you just have to do what you need to do, right? It's a lot of self-sacrifice. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of difficulty. It's a lot of knowledge. Okay, right? So you can, jump on our backside, so to speak. That's good, right? But you got to put up or shut up. You got to do it. You got to, a person who wants to do it, you got to put the pedal to the metal. That's it, right? You just got to, you just got to go through the material, go through it again, go through the third time, but you have to live it. That's the whole point. You have to live it. The more you live it, the more mistakes you make, you won't make the same mistakes. But then you know what the mistake is, right? So then, once you convert, then it's for real. So then you gotta do it for real. So make all the mistakes now. But the only way you're gonna get to the knowledge is by keeping as much as possible. That's the way you're gonna do it. Practically doing it. The more you do it, the more you'll see. The more you'll see, you'll say, I made a mistake in this, I made a mistake. Okay, understandable, right? We all make mistakes. Very good. But you want to know why you made the mistake. You want to know how to fix the mistake. So that's what they want to see, right? They want to see like that certain level of that certain level of knowledge. All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, OrthodoxConversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There you go, the Q&As, Ethics of Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at gmail.com, RBBI, CHAIM.